In this video, I'm going to break down the animation that I posted previously, AM Blue. This breakdown includes some mini tutorials as well as me sharing my thought process and experience throughout the project. And that's because I always intend to share more than just techniques, tips, and tricks. I also like to talk about the mindsets and the challenges. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Astio and welcome back to Stylized Animations. And today I want to break down this animation that I posted previously. What's it called? AM Blue. Yes, AM Blue. Yeah. How did I forget? And as you guys can see, I don't have my 3D VTuber model today because somehow it stopped working and I just couldn't get it to work. So I just gave up and you guys probably won't be able to see him for quite a while. So still, I want to make this breakdown video just to show some of the tips and tricks and also my thought process throughout the entire project. So you guys can see right now I am in this scene, the very first scene of the animation, the room that I made for this new character. And as you guys can see, some of the walls are missing. There's no roof or anything, and that's because I'm using a mask modifier on the walls because with that modifier I don't have to have problems like this, like getting outside of the wall. It's kind of in the way, so you can use the mask modifier to just hide it temporarily in the viewport and just disable it for the render, right? Let me just talk about how this entire project started. So the entire project just started out with me trying to model a new character for the channel just to have a little bit more variety, just to have more characters that I can use in my animations. So I made this new character. She's pretty cute, right? Pretty simple design, but I was pretty happy. But in this video, I'm probably not getting into the character modeling side of things. I'm probably going to leave those for future videos so I can talk about maybe hair modeling and just character modeling in general in a more in-depth manner. So yeah, I just started out wanting to make a character and then I just thought maybe I should make her a room or something. So I made her a room just like this, and then I just thought, well, maybe the animation is a little bit too short. Like initially it was just this, right? She's just doing a bunch of stuff and it was supposed to end here. And then I just thought it's a little bit too short, right? So I just kept adding some new shots after this, and I just thought, okay, I can do a little bit more, and then I just add one more, and just end up being the entire animation that you guys saw on my channel. So that's how this project was born. I didn't really have any storyboard or anything. The storyboard is in my head. Oh my god. So let me just go ahead and introduce this little room that I made for my new character. Over here, she's sleeping right now. And most of the assets in this room, they're just pretty simple geometry, like cubes, right? Just squash your cubes, scale down your cubes, cylinders attached to some cubes, right? Just like this. Another cube, but stretched. Some cubes, but extruded. And some of the assets were from my previous animations, and I just changed their colors to better match the entire vibe of this animation. You know, just a simple sphere for the volleyball, right? And pretty much everything was made by myself here except for the guitar. It was pretty complex, so I got it from CG Trader. Maybe this plant over here was something I got from Polyhaven. So for this room, I just started by looking for a bunch of references online, just a bunch of room photos with specifically a big mirror just like this, because it was kind of the initial idea that I had. I kind of wanted a big mirror in the room just like this, and then I just kind of worked from there. And I started out by laying down some very basic geometries like cubes and cylinders everywhere. I think having at least something in your scene is going to help a lot in the brainstorming process. You know, just having cubes and cylinders here and there, just spheres and all that, you can just start having some general ideas. Like you can visualize things a lot more easier. At least there's something for you to look at. Like if you look at an empty scene for 30 minutes, it's probably harder to brainstorm ideas. So at least when you have something in your scene, it's a little bit more motivating, in my opinion. So that's how I started. And I just started out adding more and more details along the way, and just importing some of the older assets just to fill up some spaces. And there's something that I always apply in my animations, and that is whatever you can't see, you don't model. You don't make whatever you can't see, right? So for example, this is the camera angle, and all the way is always this direction, right? So behind the camera, I'm not going to make anything here. Like there isn't even a door, okay? Unless I'm going to reuse this scene in the future perhaps, then I'm perhaps going to decorate a little bit more better, but I don't really add a lot of details that you can't see in the camera. So you can't see the door, I don't make the door. You can't see these parts of the shelf, I did not make that part of the shelf, right? And I want to talk about this little amp over here. For the guitar, if you guys play guitar, this is something like an amp, but it's just very simple geometry. It's even less detailed compared to everything else in the scene. And that's because this amp is being viewed through the mirror, and you can't really see all the details clearly from the mirror. So I didn't really bother to add much detail onto the amp over here, and that totally works, right? You don't have to model all those extra details that are really not visible. So I think that's a pretty nice principle to apply in your animations to save time and all that, right? And what I want to talk about next are these paintings on the wall, and some of you guys liked it a lot, so thank you. And they are really just, they're all using the same single texture. And this is a painting that I did a while ago while I was practicing painting clouds or something. It was like, a year ago, 2 years ago, I did this painting, and somehow it came in handy. At first, I just wanted to make the room kind of the normal way, just wooden furnitures here and there, but I just thought it would be cool if I actually made the room under a specific color palette. So I just thought I really like blue and white. Like the blue and white palette is very beautiful, and it has this like summer vibes to it. If you guys can feel it, right? Just try to feel it, okay? I really like the blue and white color palette, so I designed the entire room based on that palette, and somehow I just found this painting that I made a long time ago, right? That somehow can fit into this render. So I just kind of split this single image into multiple paintings. If you guys just look at the UV maps, it's just part of the painting, just like this. This one belongs to this part. This one is here, it's stretched out just like that, right? This one is here, it's kind of angled. This one is here, this one there. It's just pretty simple, interesting things that I can do out of one single painting that I did a year ago. It's pretty amazing. I really like this idea of having paintings on a wall. And the next thing I want to talk about is the mirror over here. Specifically, I want to talk about reflections in Eevee, because by default, Eevee just doesn't look really nice with the reflections. You can't really see what's being reflected most of the time. The one thing that I did here, some of you guys might not know about this, but there's this little thing right here, and this is called a light probe. What would happen if I hide the light probe? By default, reflections in Eevee, they do look like this. And in situations like this, especially for maybe there's a mirror in your scene, you need to use something called light probe. So let me just walk you guys through the process of making a light probe really quickly for mirror surface, just like this. So I'm going to select my mirror. My 3D cursor is on top of my mirror. So what I'm going to do is to just Shift H to just isolate my mirror for a while. And then I'm just going to turn off the compositing because it's kind of, too bright, right? So what I'm going to do is to Shift A, and I'm going to add a light probe plane, right? By default, it looks like this. And right now, let me just line up this light probe with the mirror really quick. So I'm going to copy the rotation of the mirror. So Control C over here, put your mouse over the rotation, Control C, select your light probe, hover your mouse over the rotation, Control V. So now it's kind of wrong. Probably have to add an extra 90 degrees. Yeah, so now that's lined up. Alt H to unhide everything and go back to the rendered view. So right now nothing is really happening. Nothing special is happening. So let me just scale this light probe to fit the mirror for a little bit more. So SX, just make sure the shape fits a little bit more. So SY, stretch it all the way so it matches the mirror, just like that. And right now nothing is really happening because you probably have to move the light probe back and forth until it perfectly captures the reflection. So G, Z, Z. So you are moving along the local z-axis. So G, Z, Z. You press Z twice for the local z-axis. So let me just move this back and forth, until something appears. And now that's the right position, right? So that is how you add better reflections onto your mirror surface. And the next thing I actually want to talk about is this blanket covering our character. It kind of looks like that under the blanket. And if I scrub through the timeline and play through the animation, you can kind of see, it's animated, right? And normally we would probably add things like cloth, physics onto the blanket, right? Something like that. But when I did that, I didn't really like the result. So what I did actually was I didn't use any physics on this blanket. Instead, I animated it by hand. So all I did was to make a plane just like that with a lot of subdivisions, and I just went into sculpt mode and just start sculpting the blanket to better fit, my character underneath, just like that, just to have a little bit of wrinkles here and there. Maybe we can use the grab brush or the cloth brushes over here. Grab cloth. It's pretty cool. We have brushes like that, right? And additionally, I added 2 shape keys that controls my blanket. So normally the blanket looks like this, but I have a shape key for something like this and something like this, because you can see it kind of moves, right? These parts kind of moves throughout the animation, right? So I used shape key animation for those parts. And for this part around the arm, you can see when my character reaches her arm to the phone. For this part, I actually use a rig to control the blanket. And this rig is actually pretty simple. It's just a bunch of bones laid across the blanket. And I just use something like automatic weights, and now I have little control points that can move my blanket around in this area. So all I did was a little bit of animation, hand keyframe. I guess it's pretty fun because it's pretty much the first time I did something like this. It's the first time I animated cloth in this way with like individual control points, just like that. I probably don't even need this many, but... And the next thing I want to talk about is actually the compositing. So I have some pretty basic compositing setup over here. It's really nothing fancy, but there's something interesting I want to show you guys around here. So originally my render looks something like this. There's in a background, it's blank, it's empty, it's transparent. So what I did was to use an alpha over node to layer my original render on top of a background color. So my original render is going to be the foreground, and for the background it's going to be this gradient over here, but I don't think this actually mattered in the end, so I'm just gonna delete it. So something like this perhaps. And after that I added some glare right here, so we have some glow on top and chromatic aberration. If I go maybe closer over here, you can see a bit of chromatic aberration, right? If I just bump up the factor, it's a lot more apparent, right? But I just kept it pretty light, just like this. And in the end, I just added a vignette, just like this. If I just turn it up, you can see the effect a little bit more clearly. But usually I just keep these effects pretty light, just like that. And something I did was to actually go to the alpha over background color. So this is my background color, right? And what I did was to go to the background color and turned up the value to 2. And when I do that, the glow effect is going to be even stronger. And you can do something like this in your material nodes as well. Just turn up the value, and that way your colors is going to be a lot more brighter and the glow is going to be a lot more stronger. But the most fun part of the compositing nodes is probably this part before all of that. So right here I have a crypto matte node. So what it did was to separate my character from the background. So you can enable crypto matte over here in the view layer settings, and down here to crypto matte, just enable like object or material. This time I only have object enabled. And with this enabled, I can go to the compositing nodes and just add a crypto matte node just like this. And what I can do is just hit the plus button and just pick any object in the scene, just like that. And if I just feed the image through the crypto matte, just like this, we can actually like isolate that area using the crypto matte node, right? It's pretty cool. If I hit the plus button again, maybe the background, maybe the mirror, maybe the bed, something like that. But in my render, I use the crypto matte to separate my character, because that way I can actually do something pretty interesting to the background without affecting my character. So, and for the background, I actually ran through the image through a Kuwahara filter right here. So through this filter, we can have a pretty interesting painterly effect, right? But if I go ahead and separate my character using a crypto matte, and I just kind of use the alpha over node to layer that character on top of this background, it's gonna look something like this, right? But it's kind of exaggerated, of course, because I turned up the value, and of course I use a lower value like 2 for my animation, so the background is kind of painterly while the character is kind of a little bit more sharp. And I think that's pretty interesting because I do see something like this in a lot of modern anime, I guess, and that's pretty interesting. And I think this is something that you guys can try if you guys never heard of this filter before. So yeah, this is pretty much the setup for this first scene over here. And you can actually view the compositing nodes in real time using this function over here. So go to the top right of your viewport. So make sure you are in rendered view, and then go to the arrow over here, and then go down to compositor and just enable only in the camera view, or just hit always so we can see the compositing nodes from all different angles, just like that. So that's pretty much it for the Blender side of things for this scene. I really like the blue and white palette for this scene. It really has that beautiful summer vibes, you know, the blue skies, the ocean, you know, just fresh and, you know, energetic, right? I really like this vibe. And there's something that I really like about this blue guitar over here, because this kind of guitar, this model of guitar is called a Telecaster, and the Telecaster has this unique tone to it that sounds very dreamy and youthful and summery, and I really like that because it really matches this entire animation. So this blue, especially a blue Telecaster, really has that summer vibe, and I really like it. And of course, I really enjoyed animating this character in this animation. She's really cute. I mean, I made her myself, but you know, just doing some morning stretches, just like that. You know, always stretch yourself in the morning or before bed. It's really good for you. So yeah, that's it for this scene, and I'm going to move on to the next one. So before I get back into the more technical side of things, I just want to talk about this one running theme between all of those following shots. So there's this one core idea that is kind of bringing or linking all of those shots together, and that is the movement of the shot. There's this up and down movement between each of the shots that was kind of linking all of these shots together. So this is something I really like to do when I was filming real life footage with my phone. I also like to do something like this, to use movement to connect every single shot in this way, and I kind of applied that idea into my 3D animation this time, and I think that's a pretty fun idea to explore, and I think you guys can try to use this kind of camera tricks as well, because what you can do in a real life camera or on your phone, you can just do those same things on your 3D camera or on your virtual camera. And sometimes using this form of connecting movement can help the viewers focus on what you intend to be the focus. So maybe try it out sometime, it's pretty fun. So this is the next shot, and in particular I want to talk about the cloud behind the character. So this is the Blender file that I used to render the cloud, and I just rendered an image of this cloud and I just composited my character on top in post. So this is exactly how it looks like in the viewport right now, and if I just go ahead and turn off the compositor, you guys will start to understand how this works. So really, if I go into edit mode, right, it's just a bunch of icospheres. that's being spawned on top of a cloud shape. So basically it's a particle system with a bunch of compositing nodes that is creating this effect. So let me just run you guys through the entire process really quick. So right now I'm in a new Blender file. It's kind of late right now, so I kind of have to keep my voice a little bit lower. But right now let me demonstrate how exactly to make that cloud from the start. So what I'm gonna do first is to Shift A, Mesh, and then go to Icosphere. Okay, you can use any shape right here, and what I'm gonna do is to just shape the cloud. So I'm just gonna start scaling down the Icosphere just like this maybe, and then I'm just gonna get into edit mode and just duplicate the Icosphere. Perhaps just try to move these little spheres on all axes, can't English, and just scale them down, scale them up, and make sure there's a lot of depth going on. So some of them is gonna be more towards the front, just like this, something like that. And you can do any shapes pretty much, so you don't have to like follow exactly what I'm doing here. You don't have to use an icosphere, and you can use like cubes if you want, maybe something like this. Okay, so this is gonna be the cloud shape. Let me just connect this a little bit better, just like that, and I'm gonna call it cloud shape. Okay, cloud shape. And then I'm going to add a Shift A, Mesh, Icosphere again, and this is going to be our cloud particle. So I'm gonna name it cloud particle, and then the next thing I'm gonna do is to just go ahead and add a particle system onto this cloud shape. So I'm gonna go to hair and then go to render as object right here, and just pick our cloud particle. And I'm gonna scale this down for a little bit and just turn up the randomness for a little bit more, maybe something like this, not so small, something like that. And then maybe what I like to do is to also change the emit from to volume, so those particles are going to be closer together. I probably don't want a lot of holes in between the particles, so I'm going to just increase the number to just make sure it's kind of dense. Maybe just decrease the randomness for a little bit because some of them are a little bit too small, maybe something like this. And of course right now you can still go ahead and change the shape of the cloud shape. And then after all the settings are done, maybe these are the right settings for me, and you can change the settings of course. Let me just go ahead and go to the modifiers and go to make instances real. And before you click anything, before you do anything, now all the particles are turned into objects, and I want to just send them all into the same collection right now. So while they're all selected, I'm just going to move them all into a new collection just like this. And right now let me go back to the shape, cloud shape object, and I'm just gonna apply the particle system. So right now it doesn't have the particles anymore, and then I'm just gonna hide this for now. So let me just turn this off up here. And for the cloud particle, I'm just gonna delete it because it's gonna cause a little bit of trouble if I don't delete it right now. But you guys can try what's gonna happen if you don't delete the particle. It's probably gonna make your computer explode. So I'm just gonna go to the outliner and just right click on the cloud particle collection and select objects just like that, and then shift select any one of these and then just Ctrl J, and now they're all joined into a single object. And you guys probably saw me did this before in some of my other videos. It's a technique that I always used in the past. So let me just add a edit data transfer modifier into the modifiers, and then let me just select the cloud shape as the source, and then go to face coordinate data, check this, and custom normals. And right now this cloud object is going to be following the normal of this cloud shape. And if you want, you can also smooth this out for a little bit with a subdivision surface modifier, but I don't think it's exactly necessary for me right now. So now I've added a new material. I'm gonna name this cloud, just like that. So first of all, I'm gonna get into the rendered view. I'm just gonna add a sunlight, just so we have a light source, just like that. And I'm gonna turn the background color a little bit more darker, maybe just black, depending on your scene maybe. So I'm just gonna turn up the brightness of the sun so we can have a strong sunlight, just like that. And now it looks like this. And then I'm just gonna start working on the material. So right now we have a principled BSDF. I'm just gonna add a color shader to RGB. So now we turn this shader data into color so we can modify it with a color ramp. And then I can start selecting the colors for the cloud. So I'm just gonna select a cyan color, maybe something like this, maybe a little bit darker, I guess, and more saturated. And I can also add one more color perhaps in between, just like that, and maybe bring in the white a little bit. And then what I'm gonna do is to add another area light perhaps, just to add a little bit of lighting from the bottom, just like this. Maybe make it bigger, a little bit stronger, so we can have a little bit of variation in the darker areas. Not so much just like this, just a little bit. So we can see a little bit of variation in these areas, in the shadow areas. And that's pretty nice. Okay, just aim it, something like that. And maybe another one from the other direction. Something like this. Bring it closer. And I think this is pretty nice right now. So right now I'm just gonna aim my camera at the cloud. I think it's just better to use a higher focal length, above 80 I guess. Maybe something like 100, just to make the cloud a little bit flatter. Maybe I'm just gonna go to the film and just check transparent so I can use this image in the compositing later. So right now I've rendered an image and it still looks like a bunch of spheres, but just trust me, trust the process, because all the magic is gonna happen in the compositing. So let me just go into the compositing and just add a new compositing setup. Okay, just zoom out for a little bit by hitting V. If you hit V, you can zoom out a little bit. Alt V to zoom in, so V to zoom out. And what I'm gonna do first is to add a Shift A filter, blur, and blur node. And I'm just gonna use this blur node to blur the separation between the colors for a little bit. So just blur it, not so much, maybe just a little bit, like 4.5. And then I'm gonna add a Kuwahara filter after the blur, just like that. Let me just move these to the side for a little bit. And like I demonstrated in my previous scene, you can use the Kuwahara filter to just get a painterly effect. So I'm just gonna use classic, is more than enough. And I'm just gonna make this a little bit more painterly. So now we have a cloud just like that. If you guys want, you can just use this as is. But I'm just gonna add another node that's gonna make this look a little bit more better. So I'm just gonna add a displace node, and a displace node basically displays the image. But if you adjust this value over here, the entire image is gonna move together, right? But if I use something like a texture, like a noise texture, so add a noise texture, the noise texture has a different value at every single point of the image. If I use the noise texture to drive the displace, then every single point of the image is gonna have a different value for the displace. So right now I'm just gonna add a vector math node after the noise texture. So I'm just gonna connect the vector to the first vector and this output into the displacement. And then for this one, I'm just gonna set it to multiply, because by default the noise texture range is ranged from 0 to 1, and I just want to multiply that range to something bigger, so it's more than just 0 to 1. That way we can see a more clear displacement with the displace node. So what I'm gonna do is to just start dragging up this vector value, and if I drag it a lot higher and then maybe increase the scale of the noise, you can start seeing the displacement is actually working, right? And it's starting to look like something, right? And if I keep increasing the value of the multiply node, you can see the entire cloud is kind of shifting over to the top right corner. And that's because the values from the noise texture is ranged from 0 to 1, and they're all positive values basically. So if I multiply that to be larger, it's still a lot of positive values. Basically, if you just displace the image on the positive side of the value, it's just gonna shift to one side. But I also want it to shift to the other side, so I'm just gonna need some negative values in this case. So what I'm gonna do is to add a vector math in between the noise and this multiply. And this time I'm just gonna set it to add. And for the vector, I'm gonna set it to -0.5. So this way I'm gonna turn the range of the noise texture from 0 to 1 to -0.5 to 0.5. So now we have both the negative and positive values, and I'm just gonna multiply that to be larger. Maybe I'm just gonna turn that multiply back down, and you can of course adjust the scale of the noise if you want, and the multiply value over here, right? And of course you can adjust the detail and the roughness values over here. And if you turn up the roughness, it's gonna be finer, but I like to turn it just somewhere in between, right? Not so much. And you can play with the distortion, but I don't really use it normally. But if it fits your style, you can use it, of course. Play with all the settings. So what I can actually do is to just duplicate this entire set of node. So the noise texture, add, multiply, shift D, and just put one more behind this. And I'm just gonna mix these two multiplies together. So Control Shift right click with Node Wrangler, and just mix them together. So now we have a mix node, and this is gonna go into the displace node. So I can use a different scale for the noise texture over here. Maybe I'm just gonna use a much lower value, so we can have bigger noise, just like that. And maybe just turn down the detail for this one, and turn up the multiply strength, just to have some bigger displacement as a whole. As you can see, just not so much, just adjust the values according to your liking. I don't want it to be too much, just a little bit is enough. So now we have something like this, and that's basically how I made the cloud in the animation. So I think this method, you can basically render the cloud and use it as a cloud card texture plane behind your scene, or maybe you can just use compositing to just add these clouds in the background using After Effects or just composite nodes in Blender. And if you guys want some animation, you can actually use the 4D noise instead of the 3D, so you can have a W value, and you can just change the slider over time just like that. So you can actually add keyframes in the compositing nodes as well. So yeah, this is how exactly I made the clouds. So this is the Blender file of the second shot, or the third shot, I guess. This shot with the blue drink latte, I don't know what you call it, blue matcha, something like that. So if you guys noticed, there is no background objects or anything, and this is the entire scene, right? My character wasn't even sitting on the chair, and I didn't even animate the character because all you guys saw was the hand, right? This is the animation, and you guys can see whatever that's outside, right? So, and I'm going to get into this drink shader in a little bit, but there's something I want to show you guys first, because this is not the only scene in the Blender file. So if I go ahead over here, and if I go to scene 02, I think, I don't know why there's another scene, but yeah, this is the background, right? So they are being split into two different scenes, and basically both scenes, they are using the same camera. And if you guys noticed, I was actually in the animation. But yeah, Trish and I was actually in the animation. And for these background characters, I actually did not make them myself. I used the Vroid Studio software to just generate these background characters, because I just need a few of them really quick. And Vroid Studio was pretty convenient in this aspect, but as you guys can see, their style is not exactly the same as mine. So I didn't really use them in my previous animations. Just this time, I need a few, maybe like NPCs behind the background, so I just use them. And sometimes their models can have problems like this with very weird topology. But yeah, this time they are different. But if I go ahead into the compositor nodes, you can see by default, we have this render layer node and just one of them being connected to the viewer and the group output. But if I go ahead and duplicate this render layer and just change it to another scene, we can actually composite the two scenes together in the compositing node. So I can just render once, and let me just use an alpha over node right here, and this is going to be a background, this is going to be the foreground, and this way I can just composite those two scenes together. So maybe I would do something like blur right here. Let me just have the blur node as an example, and I can just blur the entire background just like that. And that's something similar with what I did for this shot. But yeah, right now let me get into this drink shader that I have, because I think it's pretty interesting. So this is the original drink I had in my animation. So as you guys can see, I have a plastic cup and also a logo with a separate mesh, and also just a bunch of water droplets. But the most important thing I want to mention is the drink shader itself. So right here, it actually has a little bit of animation. And if I go into the material nodes of this drink shader over here, it's gonna look like this, right? I'm gonna get into the details, but you guys can have a look really quick. And if you guys want, you can take screenshots or anything. And let me just go ahead and duplicate this entire drink. So let me just duplicate this entire thing, I guess, so I can just work on a new cup of drink. So let me demonstrate how did I make that drink shader. So the first thing I did was to shift A, texture, noise texture. And this noise texture is going to be very useful. It's going to be the core of this entire effect. So let me just go ahead and Control T and just add a bunch of mapping nodes to the noise texture. And I'm just going to use object maybe, so that way the noise is not going to be stretched. So let me just increase the scale for a little bit so we can see a little bit more detail, just like that. And this time I'm going to need the color output. So what I'm going to do is to Shift A, color, and separate color. And this is the key actually. So if I go ahead and change this to HSV, so hue saturation value, and if I use the hue output of the separate color, it's gonna look like this. And I can go ahead and just bump up the distortion for the noise texture for a little bit, so it looks a little bit more like liquid. And then I can actually copy a texture coordinate node over here. And then I'm going to put a separate XYZ node after the texture coordinate. And then I'm gonna get the Z-axis so we can have a pretty easy top-down gradient. And then I'm going to add a mixed color node and just mix the hue output of the separate color and the Z output for the separate XYZ. And I'm just gonna set this to add. And I'm going to hit clamp result and then just turn the factor all the way up, just like this. But then I can actually go ahead and select these three nodes, so the texture coordinate, separate XYZ, and the add node. And I'm just gonna duplicate this set of nodes and put it after the add node, just like this. Connect them together. And for the second mix node, I'm actually going to set it to multiply. And then I'm going to add a color ramp between this second separate XYZ and the multiply node. And I can actually just bring the black closer to the right side a little bit, so we can have a single color at the bottom. And maybe I can just do the same for the previous separate XYZ as well. I can just put a color ramp over here, and I can just bring the white closer this time, this way. Maybe something like this. So this way we can have the mixing only happening in the middle, and the bottom is gonna be one single color, and the top is also gonna be one single color. And then at the end I can add a color ramp, just like this. Where's the color ramp? Okay, here. So let me just change the black to maybe a milk color, so white. And then for the white, I'm gonna change it to maybe a coffee color this time. Something like this. A little bit more saturated, I guess. And maybe I can go back to the noise texture and just add a little bit more detail over here. And I can play around with the roughness, perhaps, so we can have a little bit more texture. And maybe I can just swap the multiply and the add. maybe the effect is gonna look a little bit more closer. And let me just adjust the color ramp a little bit. So yeah, I think it's better to have the multiply go first and then the add goes later, so we can have something like this. And if you want to animate this shader, it's actually pretty simple. You can either control the location of the mapping node before the noise texture, just like this, or maybe you can use a 4D noise, so you can just animate the W value just like that. And for the original, I did use a combination of both, so I animated the W and also the X location. But yeah, this is how I made my drink shader in my animation. So now let me jump into our next shot, which is this one. So this is the Blender file of that shot. So this is how it looks like from camera. And if I look from the sides, there's actually a lot of gaps, right? A lot of empty space between all these objects. You can't really see those gaps from the camera. So just like the first scene, the room shot, what you can't see, you don't have to make. So I didn't really bother making anything beneath all these bushes. You know, I don't really have to make anything in between. As long as I'm kind of filling up the camera space, that's all I need. So these flowers were CC0 models that I got from Polyhaven, and I did a little bit of editing with the texture and the color. So originally the flowers weren't blue, so I just kind of painted some new colors on top, and I kind of moved some of the flowers around and just making myself this little bush right here. And if I just go ahead and move this flower, you can see everything at the back is moving as well, and that's because they are all collection instances instead of individual objects. So when I move this flower, it's basically moving the content of the collection. So I also made these little flowers things. They are just spheres with textures that I painted myself. I don't know how to pronounce their name, so it's HY hydrangea. I don't know how to pronounce it, but basically I also made a bunch of these, and also you can see there are some collection instances at the back, and also these bushes, they're kind of instanced across the scene right here, as you can see. And if you guys watched some of my previous shorts or videos, you'll probably notice this bench because I made this previously, and also these garden lamps, and I kind of made them as assets that I can reuse in my future projects. So this time they did come in handy. And of course our character is right here in the shot. She's kind of blurred out by the depth of field. So because of the depth of field, I didn't really bother to add a lot of details in the background. I just wanted something to fill up the space, but still you can kind of see that our character is holding the volleyball and also the drink from the previous shots. So you can kind of tell that the story still connects to the previous shots. And this waterfall is really just an animated noise texture. And this very big box above everything is really just there to just cast some shadows. So it kind of feels like these pillars are actually supporting something above, but I don't have to model that something because it's outside of the camera. So all I need is something like this. And also if I look from the camera view, you can kind of see I purposely lift this flower in the middle upwards, so you can kind of see this flower a lot more clearly. So this can act like a focus for the shot instead of this flower being at the same level as all the other flowers. And also just like all the previous shots, there are some connecting movements with the camera, the up and down movement. So it comes in with a upward movement and ends with another movement, just like that. If there's anything you guys are interested in particular about this animation and I didn't mention it in this video, you guys can also leave your comments so I can make another video about that topic. But now let me move on to the next shot. So this is the next shot, and a lot of it was actually done in After Effects, and for the Blender side it's really just very minimal animation and modeling. So this is actually all there is in the Blender file. It's really just my character and a plane with a sand texture on it. It's just really just a subdivision and a displace modifier with a Voronoi texture. But I guess there's one thing that is worth mentioning in this Blender file. There's this little object called holdout right here, as you guys can see at the top right. And if I go ahead and enable it, you can see there's this plane that is kind of hiding or cutting out part of the scene. So everything that is covered by this plane is going to be transparent. And if I zoom in closer, you can actually see this plane is actually hiding a portion, the bottom portion of her feet. And in order to create this effect where you can cut out part of your scene, you just need to go here in the object settings, and in the visibility, you can just enable holdout right here. So right now this plane can actually hide part of your scene away just like that, right, with a holdout function. And that's very handy in this case. So basically what I did was to first render a pass just like this without the holdout plane, with just the sand, and then I render again for another pass without the sand and with the holdout. So this way in After Effects I can actually add a layer between these two passes and just have the wave cover part of her feet just like that. So for those who actually use After Effects, this is just a very brief breakdown for the waves, just an overall breakdown, because this video is mainly about the Blender side of things, but maybe this is gonna help, so let me just put this here. But that's it for this shot, and now I'm gonna jump on to the next one. So the next scene is gonna be this one where the girl is playing guitar. So this is the Blender file of that scene, and really there's nothing special. If I zoom out for a little bit, it's really just a large box containing my character and the guitar, and there's also this very basic door thing behind, and you can kind of see a little bit of it in the final shot, but it wasn't really clear because of the depth of field, and really it's just a very simple animation, right? And right here I'm actually using the strumming hand as the connecting movement to the previous shot. So the waves from the previous shot was moving downwards in the end, so now it starts with her hand strumming downwards, and also the camera was moving downwards as well. So yeah, it's really just a very simple animation. She was like playing a minor 7 chord, I guess, and I just kind of added a little bit of movement so that her leg is actually tapping, but you can't really see up here, so didn't animate anything there. You know, what you can't see you don't make, just like I said in my previous shots. So now let me just jump onto the last shot of the animation. So this is the very last part of my animation, which is just an ending credit scene, I guess. So this is the Blender file of that final shot, and it's really just a looping animation of the character, and it's around 10 seconds, but I didn't really use the entire 10 second. So, but there's actually a few things I can show you despite this scene being really simple. So for this character, there's actually a lot of shape key animations going on. There's actually a shape key that controls how the clothes is moving, right? And just this one single shape key, right? It's just slowly swinging around just like that. There's also this one corrective shape key that I didn't really name it. It's just called key 18. So if I go ahead and turn this down, this is how it's supposed to look like by default, I guess. And with the shape key, I guess it makes the clothes a little bit more easier to read. And also I kind of didn't like how, you know, the shoulders kind of really high over on this side, so I just kind of pushed it downwards. And I guess that's just a quick fix to my rigging, I guess, because maybe my weight painting wasn't so good, so I did have to use some of these corrective shape keys to just correct the shape for a little bit. There's a shape key where I'm just gonna fix the elbow and the knees just for this shot alone, so it's really just a shot specific corrective shape key. And there's also this shape key that actually creates her entire expression. So this is how her face is supposed to look like without the corrective shape key. So I basically made a shape key just for this expression, for this shot and this pose. And also there's this one shape key where I just moved her highlight of her eyes, just so we can actually see it clearly when it's on the iris, because by default it's kind of on the left side and you can't really see it. And it makes her look like she's losing her soul with this eye over here. So I kind of moved that highlight over onto the iris so we can actually see it. So she looks a little bit more energetic and cute. Because if you do this, she kind of looks like a, I don't know, yandere or something. But yeah, even for the hair, there's a lot of corrective shape key. So basically this is how it's supposed to look like by default, and this is how it looks like with the corrective shape key. So also it's a very angle or shot specific shape key, but I guess I can change her default hair a little bit just so it looks a little bit more like this. And also there's a shape key that actually animates her hair for a little bit. If I play the animation, you can see her hair is kind of moving, and it's really just a shape key animation. It's not rigged or anything. The hair is actually not rigged at all. It kind of looks like something you see on a game like idle animation, like Zenless Zone Zero, something like that. But this is pretty much the Blender side of things for this shot, and the rest of it is really just motion graphics that I did in After Effects. And of course, overall for the entire animation, I also added a little bit of color grading and noise and effects like that, just to make the animation a little bit more cinematic, I guess. But yeah, this is the entire breakdown for my animation AM Blue, and I hope you guys find some of these tricks useful that you can use in your personal projects. And just like what I say in every single one of my videos, none of these things that I shared are rules. They are things that you can play around with, so just mix and match and just find your own style. You can learn new things, but at the same time develop your own way of doing things. So let's just say this video is an inspiration for you, and I'm also excited to see some of your work. Some of you actually tagged me on Twitter before, sharing some of your art progress, and I'm really happy to see things like that, and it really just warms my heart to know that my work is actually inspiring people, and that really makes me happy. So I hope all of you are happy as well. You know, let's all be happy artists. But that's it for this video, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.